Hey guys, we are reading Monster High Diaries, Frankenstein, and the New Ghoul at School. I've done a couple of these books already, but I'm just gonna read. I'm gonna show you guys what starting is. Should look like a fantastic little one. So, this is Diaries. So basically they have diaries and all that other stuff, but this one's going to be chapter 1 and 2 and 3 all together. So I'm just going to start reading. A diary entry. Usually my life moves at a speed of lightning. I'm always so busy having new experience and ton of voltageous fun with my ghoul friends. But for the past week, all the students at Monster High have been on Scare-Meester break, and I had no idea days could creep by so slowly, and I miss my ghoul friends. Fear leading practice, and everything about Monster High is so much when I'm not there. Spending time at home with my parents over the break has been creep terrific. Of course, it's great to spend some quality time together, getting recharged as a fam. But when school is in session, every day just buzzes with new adventures and freaky fabulous fun. So even though I love hanging out with mom and dad, and Watzit, my sweet little pig, just loves that. I've been home all week to cuddle with him. I do get a little lonely here in this big house with just the four of us. I can't wait to see my ghoul friends again. We have so much to catch up on. Frankie. Chapter 1. Hey Dad, I'm going to head over to Draculaura's castle for a bit, okay? Frankenstein shouted down the stairs to her father's lab because her dad was usually busy scaring up new inventions. She knew he might not hear her over the noise and clattering of the lab, so she stepped down a few stairs and called out, "Dad! I'll be back in a couple hours, okay?" Mr. Stein peered across the corner and looked up at the stairs at his daughter. He pushed his goggles onto his forehead and grinned. "It's alive!" Frankie rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Every morning, her dad greeted her the same way. Mr. Stein, a mad scientist and inventor, had created Frankie in his lab. Ever since the day Frankie was first jolted to life by electricity, her dad had made it clear he was amazed by his greatest creation. And he never tired of letting Frankie know how proud he was of her. "Good morning to you, Dad. Yeah, I'm alive, just like yesterday and the day before that. Is it okay if I go hang out at Draculaura's for a while? Claudine will also be there." Mr. Stein nodded. He held a beaker full of bubbling green liquid in one hand, and there was a blob of something gooey, glowing blue in the other. He held his hand up, squinting at his daughter in the bright light of the lab. "Well, look at that. This batch matches your eyes perfectly." Frankie trapezed the rest of the way down the stairs for the closer look at the beakers and her dad's hand. Whatever her father was holding did match her eyes perfectly. Frankie's left eye was a brilliant shade of gray, and her right eye was a bright blue. She loved that her eyes were unique. "What you making?" she asked, curious. She pulled her black and white striped hair back, carefully to keep the long strands from the glowing blob of blue in her father's gloved hand. She never knew what his potion and mixtures had the power to do, and her hair was looking scared cute today, and she didn't want anything to mess that up. She leaned forward and sniffed the green beaker. Smelled like bacon and roses. The blue blob in her dad's hand smelled like dirt. It was Not a great combo, but Frankie was sure her dad must be creating something voltacious. What her dad did in his lab all day was something of a mystery. She rarely hung out down here while he was doing his thing because she was usually at school or busy with her ghoul friends, but she was always curious to move more about the inventions. Just working on a little experiment, Mr. Stein distracted. A new secret project. I hope if you're making me a sister, this means she and I will have the same color eyes. Frankie mischievously poked at the beaker of green liquid. Is that your secret project, Dad? A sister for me? She grinned sweetly at her dad. There had been a few weeks last scaremester when her dad was buried for hours on end in his lab. Curious about what he was working on, Frankie had asked her mom if perhaps her dad was hard at work on building a new sibling for her. Her mom had practically choked on her cappuccino and spurted, "Oh no, I'm afraid not." Now Mr. Stein shook his head and laughed. "I'll keep that in mind if and when I work on something like a sister for you, sweetheart. But at the moment, a sibling is certainly not what I'm working on. Do you want to spend the day helping me out in the lab and I can show you around a little?" He wiggled his thick eyebrows and gently plopped the blue blob into the beaker. As if on cue, the blob wiggled and began to rise up in the tube. "We can have some fun." Frankie was torn. She really did want to help her dad. Spending the day in the lab with him sounded like a creep-terrific time, and Frankie loved new experiences. But she had been waiting to see her ghoul friends for what felt like forever, and she knew her ghoul friends were as eager to see her as she was to see them. Frankie didn't want to disappoint them. "Another day?" she asked. "You're on." Her dad nodded and turned away. Already lost in his own world, he nearly tripped and fell as he walked away, as he was too busy muttering strange numbers, patterns, and words to himself to pay attention to his own 2 feet. Frankie watched as the blob of blue goo rose up out of the beaker in her father's hand and landed on the floor with a blop. It glowed, pulsed, and then slithered away. Mr. Stein chasing after it. Frankie giggled. "Have some freaky fun with your creation in the lab today. I'll be home in time for dinner. Maybe we can order a cheese screech for dinner." Yes. Mr. Stein was distractedly from deep in the lab. "Yay!" Frankie looked around the corner and smiled at him as he scooped up the blob. "Wait, what? Screech, he said, shaking his head to clear it, but Frankie was already gone. She waved, then ran back up the stairs and out the front door. Alright, diary entry. Whenever I'm not at school, I crave the energy of Monster High. It makes me feel so alive, like right after I had a full charge. That's why I always asking Dad about the new sibling, because someday I really do think it would be voltacious to have a full house. When Claudine talks about her school break, she growls and how her house feels jam-packed and filled with craziness because she has so many family members. Even though I know they make her crazy sometimes, I also know how much she loves having a full den. Someone is always up for watching a movie or playing a game or going for a run or whatever. At our house, it's just my dad's lab full of freaky fab projects, one adorable pet, and the 3 of us Steins. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if I had a pack too. I'll have to ask Claudine if I can borrow a few of her sibs sometime to see what it would be like to be surrounded the way she usually is. I'm sure she wouldn't mind a little break from all that action. Frankie. Chapter 2. When I got to Jacalora's house a short while later, Frankie lifted a huge knocker on the castle's front door and let it crash down with a resounding thud. A moment later, Jacalora flung the door open and exclaimed, I thought you would never get here. Frankie's always cheerful ghoul friend gave her a hug. She broke into a huge smile, revealing 2 adorable vampire fangs, and her cheeks flushed a deeper pink color as she squeezed Frankie tight. Come in, come in. I can't wait to show you something. I bought you a little present on my trip this week. I'm so excited for you to see it. Frankie smiled happily. Draculaura loved helping Frankie shop for clothes, and Frankie loved having her help. Frankie's B-school friends, Draculaura and Claudine Wolf, had spooktacular style, and they were always happy to share their fashion wisdom with Frankie by helping her put together creepy cool outfits. Frankie had no doubt that Draculaura's present was a piece of clothing. Draculaura chatted excitedly about her latest trip as she led Frankie through the windy halls of the castle. Frankie was always amazed at the beauty of Draculaura's home. When Draculaura and her father had left Transylvania many years earlier, Dracula had all the pieces of their castle shipped over to the Boo world and reassembled their castle. Looks like the one they've had in Transylvania, which Draculaura said helped to make the Boo world feel more like home when they just first arrived. Of course, now Draculaura loved the Boo world and was totally thrilled to be attending Monster High. Frankie followed her friend to her bedroom, which was decorated in wall-to-wall pink, Draculaura's favorite color. Claudine was waiting for them there, sprawled out on Draculaura's floor, and contents of Draculaura's closet were thrown across every surface. It was clear that Claudine and Draculaura had been preparing outfits for this coming week of school while they waited for Frankie to arrive. Check out the fierce skirt Draculaura got for you, Frankie, Claudine exclaimed as she leaped numbly up off Draculaura's floor and rushed over to greet Frankie. With a kiss on the cheek, the bold and beautiful werewolf held up a black and white striped skirt with purple lace stitching. This is going to look classum on you. Draculaura bounced up and down in excitement. Isn't that fantastic? Try it on, Frankie. It will look totes adorable with the shirt you're wearing right now. Frankie stepped into the corner to change. Meanwhile, Claudine pawed through Draculaura's jewelry stash and found a few things she wanted to borrow for the first week back to school. You have no idea how great it is to be with you, Ghoul, again, Claudine said, letting out a sigh that sounded more like a ghoul growl. I am so ready for this Scare-Mister break to be over. Same here, Frankie. Did I miss anything fun while I was gone? Draculaura asked. Actually, I have news, Claudine said excitedly. Claude met up with some of the other guys to play basketball yesterday, and Deuce said that he heard from Cleo that there are a few new Monster Exchange students coming from Monster High after the break. New ghouls? Frankie wondered. I think so, Claudine said. Apparently, Headmistress Bloodgood is looking for students who might be willing to show them around during their first week of Monster High. You know Monster Exchange buddies? Frankie felt a bolt of excitement rushing through her body. I would love to do something like that. I remember exactly what it was like to be the new ghoul at school, and it would be voltacious to make sure the new students feel welcomed right away. Frankie's mind was going a mile a minute, and she thought about how much she wanted to be a Monster Exchange buddy to one of the new ghouls. It's hard to start a new school when you don't know anyone. Where do I sign up? You'd be such a great Monster Exchange buddy, Draculaura agreed. You know better than anyone that the new student needs to feel welcome during their first week. You should definitely tell the headmistress you want to do it, Frankie. Frankie's entire body was buzzing with excitement. She tried to rein in her enthusiasm. Sometimes when she got too excited about things, she would spark, and that had caused a few problems in the past. She tried taking a deep breath to calm herself down. I'm going to drop by the headmistress's office first thing tomorrow morning, Frankie proclaimed happily. Then she stepped into her new skirt and pranced into the center of the room to model it for her ghoul friends. What do you think? Dracula cheered. I knew it would look fabulous on you. Oh, I'm so glad I bought it. You have to wear it on the first day back after the break, okay? That will be the perfect outfit to wear for your fall project presentation, Claudine added. Scary, cute, smart, and soft-tastic. When she heard the word fall project presentation, Frankie's excitement fuzzled. Our fall project. You did finish your project, right? Claudine asked slowly. Frankie mumbled. I haven't exactly started. I haven't had my spark of inspiration yet. So I'm totally stuck. Everyone at Monster High has been asked to do an independent study project over break. They were supposed to do a project and put together the presentation that would give their classmates a behind-the-scenes look at what kind of things they like to do in their time away from school. They had been given total freedom with the project. Monster High students were allowed to do an art project, write a story, complete a research project, and a place they had visited, build or sew something, anything. The great thing about this project was that they were allowed to do anything that they got their spark flying. Claudine's eyes widened. We're supposed to present our projects in class on Monday. I stitched up one of the pieces of the clothing line I've been designing to show everyone my freaky fashion skills. That's a great idea, Claudine, Frankie said. Usually Frankie was the kind of ghoul who finished her schoolwork right away. But with this fall project presentation, she was stuck. I can't come up with anything to do for the presentation. Don't worry about it, Dracula said, trying to be as encouraging as possible. There are still 4 days left before school is back in session. You still have time to come up with something totes amazing for your project. Frankie took another deep breath, her good mood crashing to the castle floor. She couldn't believe there was only 4 days left to start and finish her fall scaremaster project. What if she couldn't come up with anything? When Frankie had first heard about the assignment, she decided that she wanted to do something to give her classmates some insight into what made her special and different from every other monster. If there was one thing Frankie was sure of, it was that freaky flaws were meant to be celebrated. But what kind of project could she do that celebrated what made her special? Remembering how excited she had been about the project when they first heard about it, Frankie couldn't believe she hadn't come up with anything yet. Usually school projects really sparked her excitement. She tried not to worry herself too much because Draculaura was right. She still had 4 days to develop something fearsome. As far as she was concerned, only one question needed to be answered. Frankie grinned at her ghoul friends. So, do either of you have an idea what I should do for my project? Diary entry. My ghoul friends helped me come up with the most vicious idea for my fall project. Since Dad is the greatest inventor of all time, I may be a little based. We realized he and I could work on building something together in his lab. What better way to share what makes me special with everyone at Monster High than to create something in the very lab where I was created? Dad invited me to join him in the lab yesterday, so I just know he's gonna say yes. And the best part of this idea is I can bring my creation to school for the presentation. An actual creation that I've built in the lab will be so creepy cool to show everyone. One problem I have is time. With only 3 days left until the end of the Scaremester break, I have to get to work right away. I know it took years for Dad to bring me to life, so I hope it's possible to bring something cool in just a few days. Maybe while I'm working on building my invention, Dad could get to work creating a new sibling for me. I can't hurt to keep asking, right? I would have gotten started on my project already, but I had something else I had to do this morning, something just as exciting. I went to see Headmistress Bloodgood to tell her I like to be one of the Monster Exchange program buddies. She said that she was really happy I was interested, and that she would email me this weekend to let me know if I'm in. Fingers crossed, Frankie. Chapter 3. As soon as Frankie returned home from her visit to the headmistress's office, the next morning she hustled to her dad's lab. Watzit trailed behind her, zapping her legs, begging for the game of fetch. Frankie had a feeling her pet could sense that the Scaremster's break was almost over, and he was trying to spend as much time with her as possible. She loved having so much time to play with him, and knew she would miss their special cuddle time. When she was back at school all day the next week, "It's alive!" Mr. Stein bellowed when he saw his daughter round the corner into his part of the lab. A portion of the laboratory had been carved out to use as Frankie's bedroom. When she was brought to life, it was Frankie's very favorite place to hang out. But the other side of the lab remained Mr. Stein's lair. Frankie laughed. "Yes, Dad, I'm alive," she agreed, "just like yesterday and the day before and the day before that," and she glanced around the lab, curious about which of the mysterious machines and tools they would be using to build her creation. "And how are you this morning, my greatest creation?" Frankie's dad put down the beaker filled with yellow liquid and turned off a machine that was buzzing loudly nearby. Frankie loved that her dad was always willing to set everything else aside for a chat with her. She knew he was very busy with his work, but he always had time for her, and she felt a little jolt of happiness each and every time her dad referred to her as his greatest creation. "My particular, actually," Frankie said, beaming. "If you have a couple minutes, I need to talk to you about something important." "Excellent," Mr. Stein said. "Let's head up to my kitchen and discuss it over the cappuccino. Your mom is always telling me I should step out of the lab for a few minutes each day to get some fresh air." "Sounds good." "Yes, and I agree with Mom. You spend so much time down there, I could help me redecorate the space a little bit. Add a few personal touches so it's not so lavish." "What's wrong with lavish?" Mr. Stein asked. Frankie took another look around. The space was filled with rusty machines and colorful beakers of liquid and creations that were half-assembled in its own way. The lab was pretty perfect. It was certainly decorated in different style than Draculaura's castle or Cleo de Nile's elegant palace. But Frankie liked it and realized she felt comfortable here. Maybe lab chick was her thing. Back upstairs, Frankie got herself a snack and settled in the table across from her dad. Frankie's mom looked up from her book and smiled. "Good morning, sweetheart. Anything special planned for today?" Frankie briefly told her parents how she was hoping to be chosen for one of Monster Exchange program buddies. I would love to show one of the new ghouls around school. Well, said her mom, it sounds really nice way to help out. I'm glad you're stepping up and be part of it. Frankie's dad took a sip of his cappuccino and coughed. Hot! Oh, it's hot! That's hot! I really ought to build a cappuccino machine and brew coffee at just the right temperature. It comes out of our machine too hot. He ripped the scrap of paper off the bottom of Frankie's mom's newspaper and jotted a note to himself. Perhaps Mr. Stein suggested giving him a sideways look. If you just took a moment to sit and relax while your coffee cooled, you wouldn't always burn yourself. You were allowed to slow down and relax every now and again. Mr. Stein grinned sheepishly. I could do that too, but there's just so much to do in so little time. He turned to Frankie. You said you wanted to talk about something. Now what's going on in your mind? I have such a voluptuous idea, I can hardly stand it. She pushed aside her plate and continued. I like to work with you and build something off of my very own in the lab. The smile that crept onto her dad's face made Frankie's heart swell with happiness. We were assigned a project over the Scaremester break. It's an independent study project of our choice, and I want to do something that will show the other students at Monster High who I am, what it is like to be in my little something about who we are would be to build something in the lab with you, Dad. We get to present our projects on Monday, the day we get back from break. Frankie's dad was nodding enthusiastically as he took in everything his daughter had said, but her mom looked less excited. Frankie's mom spoke first. This project is due on Monday, and we're just hearing about it now. That's 3 days away. Frankie shrugged. Yes. Frankie, this is so last minute, her mother scolded. You're usually much better about staying on top of your homework. I know, Frankie said with a sigh. It took me a long time to come up with a perfect idea, but it can be done, right, Dad? Mr. Stein gulped down the last of his still scalding cappuccino. He cringed, his face turning bright red from the burning coffee. So hot! He cried and leaped onto his feet. But a few coffee burns are certainly worth it. And in the name of science and inventions, of course this can be done, Frankie. No challenge is too great for a great inventor, but if we were going to make something truly spectacular, we need to get started right away. That's what I was hoping you'd say, Frankie cheered. Frankie's mom couldn't help but smile at her husband and daughter's enthusiasm. All right. It sounds like you two had better get to work, she said. But Frankie, keep in mind that leaving things until the last minute is never a good idea. Please try harder to stay on top of your assignments and responsibilities in the future. Frankie met her mom's eyes and nodded. I promise, Mom. Okay, then get to work, her mom replied, giving her a quick hug. Feeling so excited that her stitches could burst, Frankie made her way down to the lab after her father. So here's what I was thinking, she began. What if I build myself a new pet? I feel so bad about leaving Watsit home alone while I'm at school all day, and it could be fun for us, to create a new little critter for him to play with. What do you think? Mr. Stein said, a new pet, or we could try to make me a sister, she said with a sly smile. Or a brother? A little brother could be just as interesting as a sister. Frankie, Mr. Stein said in a warning tone, you know that's out of the question at the moment. My work is to build you took years, and we only have 3 days. So we need to be reasonable. Frankie nodded, giggling. I know. I just like to remind you every now and again, that it would be nice to have a sister or a brother sometime. Mr. Stein shook his head. Enough discussion of siblings for now. Don't you think we already make a nice little family of 3? You're certainly more amazing than your mother and I ever could have hoped for. Frankie laughed. Just consider it. But for now, do you think we really could make another pet? Watsit would be so excited. At her feet, Watsit sat and wagged his tail happily. See? He loves the idea of me building him a new friend. I suppose a new pet is possibility, Mr. Stein replied. Have you drawn up any plans? Of course, that's the first step to every great invention, a plan? As a matter of fact, I have, Frankie said proudly. She had been watching her father's work closely enough from afar that she already knew how important it was to plan before just jumping into things. She grabbed the designs that she had sketched the night before and that morning and set them on the lab bench. Ta-da! Mr. Stein leaned in close. Frankie waited nervously for him to say something. Eventually he murmured, and yes, I see. I like what you've done here. Yes, this is brilliant. Really? Frankie squealed. She had drawn up designs for a tiny critter, just about the same size as Watsit. Her body would be stitched together using spare parts that were lying around the lab. There were plenty to choose from. Frankie had seen a perfect plaid fabric in Claudine's bedroom and hoped she might be able to persuade her friend to sew her a new pet and Watt's matching sweater. They would be so scary cute. She was thrilled to hear that her dad was impressed. Before we begin, Mr. Stein said bustily around the lab, I need to go through some important rules for the lab, safety and essential, of course, and I want you to feel totally comfortable while you're working in here. When an inventor feels relaxed and confident in the lab, that's when the best ideas emerge. For the next hour, Mr. Stein walked Frankie all around the lab, showing her how everything worked. He introduced her to the machines whose names couldn't be pronounced, and to let her touch substances that were so powerful that, if mixed incorrectly, could destroy Monster High. Frankie was overwhelmed by everything and quickly realized that what her father did for a living was way more complicated than she had realized. But as he spoke, she took careful notes and felt like she was really able to follow along. She was totally at home in the lab, just like her dad, and couldn't wait to get started. She was so eager, in fact, that when her dad stepped around to the back of the machine to fix a loose wire, it took longer than a few moments. Frankie decided to start working on her project on her own. She grabbed a welder her dad had showed her how to use and fuse 2 pieces of sheet metal together into something that would work perfectly as the back of the shoulders of her new pet. Then she found 4 tubes that would work as legs and began sawing them to make them equal lengths. She didn't want any rough edges, so Frankie carefully buffed them all until they were smooth. She could feel the energy coursing through her body. The lab made her feel every bit as alive as a full electrical charge. No wonder her dad loved inventing so much. Mr. Stein stood proudly on the side and watched his daughter rush around the lab, pushing buttons and letting sparks fly. Her hair stood on end and her skin glowed, an even brighter green than usual. Though Frankie still had a lot to learn, her dad chose to stay out of her way so she can learn through the trail of end air. After all, he knew his greatest invention and had come after many false starts. Frankie flipped a switch on the machines and felt a jolt. Zap! She was blasted backwards. She crashed into the lab table behind her, sending a beaker filled with lime green goo spilling into the table, and the thick liquid oozed over the table's black surface, leaving a bright green trail in its wake. Several drops of the goo splattered onto the floor, where they exploded with a pop. Now Mr. Stein jumped into action. He grabbed the cloth and tossed it onto the spill, but wasn't quite fast enough. Some of the green goo had oozed under the pile of spare parts that were waiting to be used for something later. Coated in the thick green liquid, a spare part began to zap and fizz like fireworks. Frankie and her dad dived for cover under the lab bench. Frankie's eyes were wide. She felt awful. This was her first time working in the lab, and she had scared up a disaster. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I can't believe I made such a big mistake." But her relief, Mr. Stein laughed. "Frankie, this is all part of being an inventor. Sometimes things go according to plan, and other times they do not. That's all part of the process." Another pop rocked the room, and buzzing sound intensified. Mr. Stein shrugged his shoulders and said, "Luckily, this is an easily fixed. No worries, dear." He patted Frankie on the cheek. "Your next task is to clean up and begin again. After all, nothing great was ever created without a few problems along the way." Diary entry. "I'm having a beast time working with my dad in the lab. We spent all afternoon yesterday working on the moving parts for my new pet. I decided to call it the little critter Zap Pit because it seems like every time I make a mistake, one of Dad's machines zaps me. There's been a lot of zapping going on. We only have today and tomorrow left to finish up, and then it will be time for my Creepterific reveal. I'm so happy my ghoul friends and I came up with this idea for my fall project. Of course, I had no idea just how hard it would be to bring a little critter to life. I'm amazed at everything my dad has been able to accomplish in his lab over the past few years. No wonder it seems like he's always working. Inventions take a monstrous amount of time. I'm building Zap Pit out of some mint green spare parts I found around the lab that matches my skin perfectly. I'm combining them with a few parts Dad had left over from when he created WattZip. So Zap Pit's coloring will be voltacious combo of me and WattZip. And of course, just like the two of us, she'll have one blue eye and one green eye. This morning, when we tried to power up Zap Pit, she let out the most adorable little growl, and she moved. It almost seemed as if she was dancing. Then the short pursued. I had to turn her off and further adjustments. But as Dad pointed out, these are all important hiccups that need to be overcome for a successful invention. Zap Pit still has a few glitches, but I think she should be done in time for me to take her into school on Monday for my presentation. My little creation and I are going to knock everyone dead during my presentation. Frankie. That is the end of Chapter 3 of Monster High Diaries, Frankenstein and the New Ghoul at School by Nessie Monstrea. Thank you for listening, guys. We will have Chapter 4 out next.